Hi, everybody. Sid Walker here. Welcome to our webinar. And we got people getting on here, so I get started on time here today. So first of all, I guess if anybody can, if you can hear me okay, somebody say so in the question mark or the question area there. That's always good. One time I muted myself, and there we go. Thanks, Ed. One time I muted myself for about 5 minutes before anybody told me they couldn't hear me. So anyway, if all of a sudden things go silent here, let me know. All right. So the title today is For Intuitive Men and Women Who Sell Something. I figured I'd take a little more general approach, and I put the intuitive piece in there. I'm a big relationship-oriented person. We'll talk more about that today, but the intuition to me has been a really important aspect of my coaching practice, and 38 years at this point. The biggest growth to me comes from intuition, comes from your ability to be more intuitive, access more intuition, and we'll get into all that today. So, let's see if I can get my deal to work here. There we go. How to get the most out of this call. Keep an open mind. I'm come from a different perspective. I've been doing all kinds of programs all my life. I got into leadership level, a lot of things, including 10 years as a lay monk in a monastery in Long Beach, California, run by women. That was interesting. Very advanced program on intuition. So I've got a different perspective, I guess, from all that input and the other types of things, NLP and I would say asking questions, interviewing is probably one of my biggest strengths. That, along with overcoming call reluctance and fear of self-promotion, have been two of my main focuses for a lot of years. So anyway, give this 100% of your attention. The slides, are probably 50-50 in terms of importance. If you want to do something else while you're listening, you can certainly do that. And I think the other thing I like to say is everything I'm going to talk about is proven. I've taken some of the most gentle, soft-spoken people that are in sales and turned them into some of the biggest producers in the company. And of course, I've done a lot of that with financial services. I've created some of the biggest people in the business, biggest producers, including some women in that category, which is interesting because it's a smaller percentage. It's growing all the time, but it's still a pretty small percentage overall of men to women in the financial services. So anyway, no more thinking you need to be pushy or controlling to make it big. We'll talk about that in a couple different ways today. You can be super low-key and outproduce all the hard chargers. And I think along that line, everything I'm going to talk about is proven. It's highly tested with thousands of clients. And I personally use everything I talk about myself, always fine-tuning that process, but it keeps getting simpler. And I'm going to give you some of those simple things today. So the goal is, what I'm talking about is going to be easier, more fun, and is going to result in more sales than what you're currently doing now in most cases. Unless you've worked with me or with somebody similar, there's not a lot of people doing the low-key approach, but it evolves. It's more, I find more so there's fewer coaches doing the low-key approach. There's lots of advisors doing it because they just discover by trial and error that's what works. So the purpose of this preview is to basically give you highlights of 38 years and thousands of clients, kind of a few of my greatest hits in terms of what's really worked, with the leading to the goals to be more peaceful, more relaxed, more confident, more self-fulfilled. Those are big things. Get the stress out of the job, have more fun, make more money. I mean, it sounds like a dream, but it's very possible. I'm having more success with that today than ever. And I'll give you some of the secrets today. All right, so logistics. We'll go for 50 minutes. You can ask questions as we go, and I'll try to answer those as we go. I won't do a formal Q&A at the end. However, I will be around. I've got a couple more appointments today, but phone me, email me. Happy to talk on the phone. Is probably the quickest way to answer questions. So I'm very available in that regard. And then, and I mentioned if you don't hear me, let me know in the question box. If you're having trouble with your computer speakers, just call in on the phone. That seemed to always work. That's free for most people. I don't think anybody's paying for make a phone call these days. Or if you are, it can't be much. All right. So let's do 2 basic approaches to selling. I always like to touch on this because it's very, very key to our conversation. You've got client controllers, which is a traditional approach. That's more the hard chargers. It's more aggressive, more pushy, more controlling. Do whatever you can to make the sale. People who are looked at as buying units, they're too dumb to buy the stuff on their own, so you got to talk them into it. Or the other, my other favorite is that guy's got your money in his wallet, and your job's to get it. Okay, so you all know that routine. All right, so then you have the relationship builders. Now that's a whole different animal here, and the rules are different. I've got that down at the bottom. The rules for success as a relationship builder are very different than the conventional wisdom. So, relationship builders are not pushy, aggressive, or controlling. They want to connect with people. They want to help people. They're willing to do whatever people want to do. Typically, the way I like to say it is you care more about the person or the client than you do the sale. Which again, that drives the client controllers crazy. Good communication is a key. Exchange of ideas. And you want to feel good about what you're doing, and you want your client to feel good about what they're buying or what you're recommending, and you want them to buy it and keep it. So you get the idea here. My guess is the client controllers in the general population are probably 20%. Maybe a little more, and then in sales, you got a lot more people that are more assertive that like to be in sales. So it's probably half and half. Half the people are what I would call relationship builders, the other half are client controllers. So I'm not about trying to change the client controllers. They can do whatever they want to do, and some people prefer that. That's fine, but I'm definitely an advocate of the relationship builder approach, and have been basically researching, studying, and coaching that for 25 years, let's say. All right, and I've proven, like I said before, I've proven beyond any doubt that you can be as successful as anybody in this business with a low key approach. In a lot of cases, way more than most people. It's just a lot less work. It's a lot simpler too. I think there's a tendency to complicate everything. You'd be surprised how simple you can get the whole sales process. Some of the products are going to be complicated, but the sales process can be pretty simple. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. Challenges for relationship builders. You got, your average sales organization is what I call a giant ego. They don't really care what you do. They just want numbers. They want you to make sales. So that typically means that because there's more of an ego orientation to the corporation, they tend to still teach pretty aggressive approaches. I find that pretty consistently. Nobody's changed the training too much. They train a lot on products, but very little really on a relationship-based approach. Most of the time, if you're getting sales training, it's more aggressive. So nothing wrong with that, but the problem is if you're a relationship builder and you're getting client controller training, that's going to create a lot of problems. And that's really a lot of what's given me a job for 3 decades here or more, is that you're operating way below your potential. You're being held back. If your sales training is basically client controller related and you're a relationship person, none of that stuff applies. It doesn't work. You can't go out and push people to do things. And I'll add that some of the biggest people, I say biggest people, you know what I mean, biggest producers in the financial services business that I have worked with don't use any sales technique whatsoever. They don't do any kind of close. Trust me, I've been watching that for many years. Because you don't need it. If you're a good interviewer, and that's the key, you got to be a good interviewer, not a good salesperson. That's if you're a relationship builder. If you're going to be a client controller, then you got all different rules again, because that's a different job actually. All right. So I think the net result here is let's get rid of the frustration. Let's get rid of anything. To me, my goal when I'm coaching people is to get every part of the process to feel right. There should be no internal conflict with any part of whatever you're doing. in terms of your sales process. I mean, obviously, there's a reason they call it work. I mean, I'm not saying everything's easy and everything works every time, but you want to get the internal conflicts out of there. All right. So let's talk about intuition. I've been big on intuition for a long time. As I said at the opening, intuition to me is really the key to growth and breakthroughs, success at any level, whether it's business or relationships or sports or you name it. Your ability to trust your intuitive instincts is a big deal. And interestingly, we've been trained to ignore that part of ourselves for the most part, which I'll give you an elaborate explanation of here today. That's my new book, Living in the Zone. So, defining intuition, it's a very abstract, subtle kind of thing. So it's different for everybody. So it's a little hard to put your finger on, but things like, the still small voice is one you hear often. Knowing that something either feels right or it doesn't feel right. One of my favorite, more analytical ones is internal promptings barely caught in the web of human consciousness. Okay, internal promptings barely caught in the web of human consciousness. Intuition is extremely subtle. Okay, it's easily overridden by the ego chatter, which I'll tell you more about today. The other one I like is the barely audible voice of heaven. Okay, so a lot of pretty interesting comments about intuition in terms of where it's coming from and what it can do. So, two other things I'll mention, and then I'm going to give you a couple other slides to show you how it works. But the speed of intuition is really almost unimaginable. I mean, there is no restriction really to the speed. You see it in sports. You can't play sports analytically. You're going to get killed or you're going to be out of the game. I used to play a lot of ice hockey. That's probably the fastest game I've ever played. And I used to play with NHL guys and IHL and Michigan State varsity. I used to manage an ice arena, and I'd have a midnight night of all these characters out, all of our Canadians, and skate for an hour trying not to kill each other. And, it was amazing. I mean, it's the kind of game, those guys are so fast, it's so unconscious. If you stop to think, you're out of the game, or run over. That happens a lot. But anyway, there's lots of other examples of, intuition, where the only way you can do something is intuitively. Driving a stick shift, for example, in a car. You start out, you're a little more methodical, but once you get the feel for it, you just do it. You don't even think about it. The database. So you got speed, massive speed for intuition compared to your analytical mind or your intellect can maybe process a couple pieces per second. Okay, your intuition, millions of pieces per second. The database size is another one. Your conscious mind or your intellect can only hold a certain amount of information. It's like if you cram for a test, you can put a bunch of information in, you take the test, and you forget all the information. Your conscious mind is not designed to remember much, but your intuition remembers all kinds of things and pretty much everything. You could say we have total recall if we're highly developed, but there are many other aspects to it. I don't have time to get all that today, but just take it this way, in that the database size, the way I like to say it is the size of the database for your intellect is the size of a grain of sand compared to your intuition, which would be the 600 miles of beaches in Florida. Okay, it's actually bigger than that, but that gives you some way to hold it. Think of how many grains of sand there would be in 600 miles of beaches in Florida. There's the difference is unbelievable between the intelligence of your intellect and the intelligence of your intuition. I mean, it's laughable. The intuition is so big. But, and again, we've all been trained to ignore that and use what I love to call our intellect or our analytical mind, which I love to call the dumbest, slowest part of the brain. We use it for everything. It's what we're taught to do. So let's go. So let me see the next slide here. So let me give you an example. This is from my book, Trust Your Gut. I used to speak a lot on this, and there's some slides I used to use. But the analytical mind is constantly collecting information, actually even organizes it. You see all those pieces of kind of random information on the left there. Then that gets fed to the intuition, which turns that information into a feeling. Let's say you're riding a bike, for example, or a stick shift. I mentioned that. So riding a bike, some people get on the bike and just ride it without falling. I fell a couple times before I figured that out. I was actually on a hill on a gravel road. It was a little treacherous, but I did it. But you gotta, sometimes you fall a little bit. Your analytical mind's collecting all that information at 100 miles an hour because it's trying to keep you alive at the same time. And so you finally get you steer, you balance, you move your body around, and you get the feeling for what it's like to ride the bike. And then once you know how to do that, you just get on and ride. You don't think about anything. My dad's an orthopedic surgeon. We used to talk about. So he's still alive, 95. And but we used to talk about how many reactions, chemical reactions, the body have to happen to ride a bike. I mean, it's in the millions. Literally millions of things need to happen just to ride a bike or even walk across the room in terms of what's happening in your body. Chemical reactions, muscle movement, and all the things that are going on. And of course, we don't monitor any of that. We just walk across the room without thinking. We have a feeling. So the intuition literally can process millions and millions of pieces of information per second and remember everything that it needs to know. All right, so you're getting the idea here. So there I got one piece per second. Maybe you could do a couple if you're analytically fast. You got a fast intellect. The feeling side, the intuition, millions of pieces per second. And of course, the part that really gets fascinating is on the intuitive side then, you've got a sense of direction and timing, which the analytical side does not have. When I used to speak a lot, I would say, if you're all intuitive, you have a tremendous sense of timing and direction. However, if you're all analytical, let me back up. If you're all intuitive, you have a tremendous sense of timing and direction, but you may have trouble getting things done. If you're analytical, you tend to be good at getting things done, but you may be doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. So ideally, it's a combination. The analytical really was designed to be a tool for the intuitive. It wasn't meant to be the lead player in everything, which is what we've been socialized to do in our society. Analytical takes control over everything. You figure everything out, linear logic. Whereas your intuition, interestingly, it really can process massive amounts of information and give you an answer, but the process is so big, you don't get to see how it got to its answer. It would take weeks to even see how your intuition could got to its thumbs up or thumbs down. Intuition just gives you direction. It doesn't give you the process, which of course is why why our whole academic system tends to be more based on what's observable and provable. That's much safer. Trusting your intuitive instincts is without any proof that it's going to work. That gets to be a little more risky. But I'll give you some ideas on how to deal with that today. So on the feeling side, you've got direction, timing, vision, values, purpose, mission, motivation, inspiration, all the big guns. People tell me all the time, I've been coaching forever, as I've mentioned. One of my questions is something like, do you have trouble setting goals that have meaning? Almost everybody says yes. And the reason is there's no intuition, there's no feeling. If you set goals that have some feeling, over there where your vision, values, purpose, mission, inspiration are, you're going to have goals that have meaning, I guarantee you. Most of the time, we're taught an analytical approach to setting goals, which is almost pointless, really. So you want to get over on that feeling side. What feels right? Or a quick goal setting thing. Go out 10 years. Your analytical mind can't think out that far, so it can't put barriers in. Go out 10 years and then just dream up all kinds of stuff. Then go back over the list, decide what feels right, and then plan backwards. It won't take 10 years to do most of it. I've seen people do it in a year. They have to get a new list. I'm sure some of you had that experience. All right, see if I got any more slides here. All right, so you got the last one there. So let me finish up on this slide. Challenge. About the fifth bullet down there. You don't get to see the process. So actually, trusting and acting on your intuition requires a leap of faith. Okay. It requires, which is also why if you're somewhat spiritual, to me, you're going to have more guts to be more intuitive. When I'm trying to qualify somebody as a new client, I usually am looking for, are they somewhat intuitive, somewhat spiritual, open to doing new things, and care more about the client than the sale. To me, those are the key, because you can do the intuition without being spiritual, but it's a lot more powerful if you are. And I don't mean religious. To me, spiritual means is you believe in something bigger than yourself. Doesn't matter who it is or how it works. As long as you have that feeling that there's something bigger there that you can trust. That's also the source of intuition in a lot of cases. Or as I like to say, not all intuition is divine guidance, but some of it is. Um, and in a lot of cases, a lot of it is. All right. So that's why intuition gets ignored to a great extent, because people are into control. People want to do the sure thing. People don't want to make mistakes. And so the intuition can look like fleeting thoughts, that you can't prove. Why would you trust that over the conventional wisdom and the analysis of your analytical side? All right. Only validation, past experience, keep a log. You're going to see more why I'm bringing some of these points up in a second here when I start talking about the ego. But the only validation really for using your intuition is past experience, where you've trusted your intuitive instincts and you've seen it work. Because there's a part of your brain that pretty much doesn't like intuition, and it's going to try to erase any experiences there as fast as it can. So it's powerful that I've kept a log for about 25 years of every time I've made an intuitive choice on what's happened. It's amazing when you start to watch it, how smart your intuition is. My first book, Trusting Your Gut. Trust Your Gut now. It was Trusting Yourself in the beginning. I changed it, put a fancier cover on it 10 years ago or so. But I didn't think I could write a book. And I read this book called Writing the Natural Way by a gal named Rico. And I did the exercises. And one day I was doing the exercise with the book, and you're supposed to, it's a good thing to do with clients too, by the way. You write down the person's name, in this case, I wrote the title of the book in the middle. And then I wrote down everything that I could think of about trusting yourself that I wanted to put in this book. And then interestingly, I lost that piece of paper. And then 6 months later, after the book had been published, I found that piece of paper. It took me a minute and a half to write that piece of paper, with trusting yourself in the middle. And everything I put in the book was on that sheet. I mean, how's that I outlined my whole book in a minute and a half, and it took me several months to write it and then get it published. But I mean, our intuition is so unbelievably smart, it's embarrassing, and we've been trained not to use it. Another guy, I got Glickstein down there. I've hired a lot of speaking coaches over the years. I don't speak anymore, pretty much just do webinars. But I had one of the, just some brilliant people. I spent a small fortune on that stuff, and a lot of fun, really. But there's Lee Glickstein's the guy in San Francisco, did a program where about usually 30 people in his group, and then they would be videotaping your talks, and you would get the title of your talk as you approach the podium. Okay. So it's like, so you have no chance to prepare. But his point was he wanted to show you that your intuition will create a talk for you. And it was amazing to watch person after person walk up to the podium, be given a topic, and create a beginning, middle, and end, and even include a few jokes, and actually create a brilliant speech that you would think that they took a lot of time to learn. I mean, it's amazing. And I'll never forget that. That helped me a lot in my own speaking to realize, you could not even know what you're going to talk about and stand up and talk. But you've got to have access to your intuition. If you drift over into your analytical mind, and it's negative vibe, negative chatter in there, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't know what to say. That's all becomes an instant self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't know what to say. You just stand up and be nervous. Whereas if you can relax and trust your intuitive instincts, there's no way you're not going to know what to say. So, all right, I could give you 100 examples. It's amazing. Oh, here's a fun thing too. I wanted to show you this. This was a Columbia University study where they found out that if you can spell words any way you want to, as long as you keep the first and last letter the same, your intuition will figure out and can read anything, no matter how jumbled the letters are, as long as the first and last letter are the same. So read along with me here. Your analytical mind cannot read this sentence. Intuitively, you read amazingly well. Anyway, but the first time I put that in a newsletter, I got everything, every email I got was all misspelled. So anyway, you're welcome to do that, or try that on a friend. Just make sure the first and last letters are the same. All right, let's see if they can figure it out. All right. So here's the problem with being more intuitive, and I'll say right now, you can't learn to be more intuitive. We were all intuitive as kids, and then it gets blocked. we're actually trained to ignore our intuition to a great extent. Even women that are very intuitive, same kind of training to ignore it. A lot of my female clients would say, or my women clients would say that they have a lot of feelings, and you have to differentiate between emotion and intuition because they're different. Most guys don't differentiate much between that. They just call everything emotion. Guys are just glad to have some kind of feeling, usually. For me, it usually comes last. I think for a bit, and then the feeling shows up. Sometimes it's there in the beginning, but not mainly in sports, I guess. Sports, I'm more, when you're just focusing on how things feel and you're not thinking at all, then you can do the feeling first. But and sometimes people say go with your first thought. For guys, that's pretty dangerous, and I would say even with women, in a lot of cases, your first thought is not necessarily going to be intuition. It can be if you're highly trained and good at it, but training, what I said was you can't be taught to be more intuitive, but you can taught to be more aware. Your intuition's always there. We just don't listen to it. We've been trained to ignore it. And the main reason that is because of the ego. I've made major breakthroughs in the last couple of years. I mean, unbelievable breakthroughs in my coaching. In fact, it was so powerful. I wrote a book. My new book's called Living in the Zone. Just came out in August. It's also on audio. I'll talk about my books at the end. But I was having so many amazing breakthroughs with people. I just had to write what was going on, including myself, because I've been studying this stuff. I like to tell people I knew in high school, literally, I knew as a junior in high school, as I looked around at other people, I could tell there was something they didn't know, and I concluded myself I didn't know what it was either. So 50 years later, approximately, I figured out what it is, and it's basically until you know what the ego is, how it works, what it sounds like, you're always going to be held back. You're always going to be, and there's always going to be a hole in whatever you're doing, or there's always going to be a feeling that something's missing. The ego is an amazingly complicated part of our reality, and most people don't even know it's there, literally. The definition of the ego in Webster's, which is good, talks about it's about self-esteem and self-importance or self-worth. That's true, but that's like less than 1% of what the ego actually does. It's much, much bigger in the sense that it's a collection of the ego's been watching activities in our life and making recordings of everything that's happened, especially at paying attention to anything negative, in order to help us survive. Because that turns out that the ego's goal is to survive. It doesn't really want anything to change. Excuse me. So let me get a quick drink here. So to go back to kind of how did the ego get created, I put a couple different explanations in my new book. There's lots of different theories on that. But basically, let's say spiritual scholars, not all, but some would say that negativity, for example, is not part of the original reality that we were given. And then the original reality was basically peace, love, joy, and abundance with no opposite. In other words, no negativity. Something happened along the way that made people afraid. I could give you several examples, but again, they're in the book, and there's lots of different ideas about that. But we weren't negative in the beginning. There was no negativity, and my guess is for a long time that wasn't the case. Something happened, made people negative, fearful. Probably fear was what did it. That created negativity, and then that created the ego. There was no ego in the beginning either. And so the ego then was created as a way to deal with fear, negativity, and basically being separated from source. That's the main source of fear, is that you're separated from God, separated from spirit, that somehow now you have to figure out this life on your own. You're all by yourself. That's the ego's motto. I'm all alone. I need to figure out how to survive, and it's a life and death matter. Okay, so you think about, and then not only that, the ego's been around for tens of thousands of years. So, I mean, it's brilliant. It knows every trick in the book. It's been around forever. It never sleeps. We inherit it from our parents just like they inherited it from theirs. And then, so, I mean, even though there's two realities, there's the original reality we were given with no negativity. That was my biggest breakthrough. When I realized that's still there, that reality still exists, sitting right there. Anybody can get into it that wants to. Or you can go with the ego reality, which is what most people choose. That's normal. Normal is ego created reality. The world that we live in basically is created by egos. like I call it intuitive spirits. So anyway, that this I'm just giving you a tip of the iceberg on this, but this becomes the key to overcoming all barriers. I'm an expert on overcoming call reluctance and fear of self-promotion. I've had amazing results using this approach in that area. I mean, I literally can. I mean, in my own case, I am fearless on the phone at this point, and I've had more call reluctance than any 10 people in my life. But with this kind of approach, the more, and I'll say it right now in a quick way, it's the more you can learn to shut down your ego, basically ignore it. You can't negotiate with your ego. It's too smart and it's too fast, and it knows every trick in the book. The beauty is you can ignore it and it has no power. That's the key. That's probably my biggest breakthrough in my life, is to realize to ignore your ego and be intuitive, and you were on a roll. I mean, you were in the zone. And that's, by the way, the title of my new book, Living in the Zone. So anyway, new stuff. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but at the same time, there's nothing new. Everything I'm talking about is in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu Bible. It's in the Christian Bible. It's in the Chinese I Ching, which is probably 6,000 or 7,000 years old. I mean, I've studied all this stuff. Spending 10 years as a lay monk in a monastery, we studied everything, and that's one of the more humbling things you realize is there is nothing new that hasn't been around for thousands of years. However, that doesn't mean people are aware of it. In other words, it's kind of glossed over. Most people just wake up and they be an ego all day and don't even think about it. Being intuitive is something we've been trained to ignore. And here's the issue. Your ego hates intuition. Your ego wants to be your savior. The ego wants to give you the answers to all your problems. It doesn't want you to trust your intuition because that's an unknown. The ego is obsessed with control and dominance and figuring everything out. Your intuition is a total unknown, which the ego hates. So it's an amazing war that's going on there, and it's been going on forever. I mean, ever since negativity got created, however that happened, that war in our head has been going on. And so the part that's becomes fascinating, and you see it on the news all the time, all the negativity, all that stuff. Yeah, you don't have to live in that world. You can actually step into another world, which I call living in the zone. And in the zone, where there's no negativity, you're perfect the way you are. There's nothing to fix. How's that? What does that do to self-help? If you can change your thinking and step into a zone or a way of thinking where you're perfect the way you are, there's nothing wrong with you. You can't fail. How's that? That's my favorite. In the zone, you're perfect the way you are and you can't fail. Doesn't mean everybody's going to buy, but you're going to make lots of money. Failure's not really an option at that point. I mean, certainly it's a possibility, but it's not very likely. And you've all had the experience. You know what it's like to be in the zone. It's a very non-thinking kind of awareness. I mean, I can think about it more in sports, although I do it on the telephone. That's how I train myself to take it to a whole new level. I get in the zone when I get on the phone. I'm totally fearless. There's no negative thoughts. I can talk to anybody. I can call anybody. It's amazing how well it works. And, one thing I'll say is what I'm talking about is incredibly simple, but it takes guts. It takes a lot of guts to not listen to the ego and walk away from that conventional wisdom. And I've seen people that can't do it. In a lot of cases, the couple of very wealthy people I've worked with couldn't do it. That's another whole story. But most everybody so far, I've only had a couple of people and they're really analytical people, totally into control, made a lot of money, like many millions, and just too big of a risk to let go of that package. So anyway, for most of us, if it feels right, you can do it. I'll put it that way. All right, let me check in with my notes here. So I've got the ego thing. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say about the ego. I was just kind of winging it here. Wasn't thinking much. Because and again, I wrote a whole book on it, but the book's pretty simple. It's probably 80. The first 80 pages covers everything I've said in detail. So it's a shorter book. It's 120 pages probably. I think one of the things that's fascinating about the ego, again, most people don't even know it's there. It's so seamless. But it is the source of all negativity. It's that chatter in your head. It's that voice that's always constantly criticizing you and other people. It's constantly judging and evaluating everything. You can just block that stuff out. It's a total waste of time. But the thing that's probably the most amazing to me about the ego is that one of my favorite new authors, Nuke Sanchez, actually an Australian woman, wrote a book called Take Me to Truth. And but she basically says, she's an expert on this stuff, and basically says that the mantra of your ego is actually seek and do not find. The part of us that are part of us that are listening to that voice in our heads, judging and evaluating everything, its goal is really no change. It doesn't want anything to change. And that's why, bigger perspective here, we'll go to the giant perspective, which is our technology is increased exponentially. Human nature hasn't changed pretty much at all, ever. It's pretty much the same as it was. I mean, certainly it's better than it was. If you want to watch a movie from the Dark Ages or something, yeah, we've maybe moved a little bit in the right direction. But in general, we're still got a lot of problems that we need to overcome. And this is the source. The ego is the source of all of that baggage and all of that negativity. And the beauty of it is you can live in a reality that doesn't have that in it. Doesn't mean that there's no negativity. In fact, that was another interesting quick point I'll make on the. That was when I saw this for the first time. I went, oh, how's this going to work? Can I be in the zone and be around other egos? Because most people are operating more as an ego rather than being in the zone. And then I realized there has to be a transition. Where you can start out, you start to learn to be in the zone, then you do it more and more time. I have a lot of clients now that are doing it, and they all say there's no way they'd ever go back to what they used to do. It's too much fun to be in the zone, and it's too powerful. Anyway, get my book. I'll tell you how to do that, and that'll answer a lot of your questions, because I'm sure I've created a bunch. All right, let me see what else I got here slide-wise. Okay, well, let me give you, here's my formula. Give you a quick formula on how do you push the ego out of the way. The formula I came up with is PIN. P stands for stay in the present moment. The ego lives in the past and the future. In fact, some people say the ego can't exist in the present moment, which is pretty interesting. So, again, that's another whole webinar, but I'm just going to focus on give you the formula so you can start practicing this. Stay in the present moment. In other words, if you hear things, if there's any negativity going on based on the past or the future, the ego's gotten back in the game. You've lost your edge. You're not in the zone anymore. So stay in the present moment like you would in sports. Maybe prayer, maybe meditation would be another one. Those are good examples. You get what I'm doing. You get what I'm saying there. Innocence of a child, that was an interesting one. They came to me. I was watching Army Wives one night, doing some computer work, reruns, and they bury a lot of people, a lot of funerals on that show. A lot of guys die, obviously, in the armed services, and so the chaplain was doing a eulogy, and he said, and of course, you can't get in the kingdom without the innocence of a child. I mean, he said a couple things before that, but the light bulb went out, and I went, of course, that's another piece. The ego's trying to figure everything out, work every angle, trying to plan and scheme and do all this stuff where you really don't need to do a lot of that stuff. Your intuition is so smart. You can basically have the innocence of a child approaching anything. I'm not saying you don't walk into things with basic information, or especially you don't want to do anything dangerous, but really your intuition is brilliant. One of the things in the monastery they would teach, one of the teachings was you'll be given what you need as you need it if you're in the zone. So it's a whole different reality, really, and it's got different rules. But so, I'm saying you can practice some of this. And then the biggest challenge is the end, no negative thoughts or feelings. The more you can start to see that any kind of negative thought or feeling is coming from the ego really doesn't know what it's doing most of the time. It's operating based on film. It's not connected to our higher intelligence. I remember I gave you the difference in the databases. The ego is working with the intellectual database, which is tiny, and based on past experience, which is still tiny compared to your intuition, 600 miles of sand. Which do you think you're going to get a better answer from? The problem is you got to trust your intuition. It's not going to give you the logic of why I came up with that. So, PIN, present moment, innocence of a child, obviously with the resources of an adult. Obviously with I'm not saying you're not logical, but it's more when you stop trying to work every angle and just kind of open yourself and be aware of what's happening. I mean, if you're playing sports, I'm a good snow skier, good tennis player. If I'm playing well in those games, I'm not thinking about much. I'm listening for what feels right. What shot does it feel like I'm supposed to hit? not based on intellect, but based on what does it feel like. So it's just, I have people going through the whole day doing this. In fact, in the next slide, I think, so everybody got that PIN. That's in the book. And here's another. A lot of people want to be more intuitive when they start to hear me talk about this stuff. So it's really as simple as asking yourself questions, which is kind of like prayer in a way. In prayer, you ask for things, but you're asking questions, and then you wait for the answer. Intuition works the same way. It's very similar to prayer, in that you ask a question, you wait for the answer. With your ego and your intellect, you figure out answers. You force the answer. So this is a different approach. And so you ask yourself questions, but you wait for the answer. So two of my favorite questions are, what does it feel like it's time to do now? Okay? There's no should in that. There's no logic. There's no correct way to do it. What does it feel like it's time to do now? My other favorite is, who does it feel like it's time to call now? Those are not analytical questions. They will not tap that part of your brain. They will tap your intuition. And then ask yourself that question once an hour. If there's nothing there, go back to what you were doing. But if something pops into your head, like somebody's face, or so you imagine someone, call them. I mean, you'll be amazed at how many. I mean, I know some of you already do this, but you'll be amazed at how many times you call people like that when they've popped into your awareness. Oh, I was just thinking about you. I need some life insurance. Or we need to talk. Whatever. It's amazing. There's just a whole lot more going on than what the ego's figured out. I mean, the conventional wisdom and the ego really creates normal, but there's so much more to life. It's almost unimaginable, and you can't really get at the rest of it without being more intuitive. Because the ego is going to lock us into a very structured existence. It doesn't want any surprises. Ego wants to be rich with no effort. It hates rejection. It hates mistakes. It hates, I said, surprises. I mean, the ego is a very boring character, and we're all listening to it. All right. Well, that's my sermon on that. I could keep going. I think you get that impression. All right. So in the time remaining, I'm going to give you as many tips as I can on how to make more sales within this parameter of less ego, more intuition. One of the things, how you hold the sales process, this is a big deal. I've seen this work, incredibly for 20 plus years. But you literally change jobs. When you get out of sales and get into the job of helping clients make informed decisions that feel right to them, it's all about intuition. You need to be doing what feels intuitively right, and you need to get the client to do what feels intuitively right. I'll give you a couple more questions on that in a minute. My opening language. I mean, I'm doing it from memory here. I think I wrote it down, but basically, it's one of the things you say to everybody in the beginning, somewhere in that first meeting, is, I'm bringing different values to the table. I'm not like everybody else in this business. And I basically, I feel my main job is to help you make educated decisions that feel right to you, which actually includes not doing anything if that's really what feels right. I'm not here to try to talk you into buying a product. Obviously, I've got lots of products that you can buy, but that's not a requirement for you and I to be friends and for me to help you. And I'll make you one other promise. If anything doesn't feel right to you, we're not doing it, period. Man, that people just eat that up. That's what everybody wants, and it's hard to get. So you got to tell people. I mean, if you're really a relationship builder and that's the way you operate, I have people tell me that all the time. I tell them a whole bunch of stuff, and they go, well, yeah, that's the way I do it. But they don't say it. You got to tell people what you're doing. Otherwise, they think you're a client controller, and they're going to have to fight you off. You got to first of all, you got to tell people what you're doing. Tell them they're on their side. Give them some specific language for that. Which, by the way, on my website, Selling Without Wrestling, which I'm now giving away to people, it used to be $50 a month or $47. And the handout archive, that opening language that I just did is numbered. Opening language, where is it? Oh yeah, number 13. There's hundreds of pages of handouts from my speaking and seminars in the handout archive. It's all the way to the right in the sellingwithoutwrestling.com website. So anyway, that's part of your job. That's the heading of the job is to shift, get out of sales and get into the job of helping people make informed decisions that feel right to them, which includes doing nothing. Now, you have a harder time going back to a sales meeting with this kind of stuff. The client controllers are going to kind of laugh at you and go, well, you're not going to make any sales doing that. But my average client is a 90% closing ratio. None of the client controllers ever get over 30. the business doesn't stay on the books if they do. But I mean, 90. I have some guys that kid me say theirs is higher than 90. And I don't. Some of them I don't think are kidding. But the point is, it's not because they're good closers. It's if you're helping people figure out exactly what they want to do and you're on their side. Why would and then whatever you propose to them fits exactly what they want? Why wouldn't they buy it? That's how you get a 90% closing ratio, not by forcing people or trying to trick people or get out the book of the 30 closes and all that stuff. It's ridiculous. You don't need to do any of that. But you do need to be a good interviewer. And I have another book on that called How to Double Your Sales by Asking a Few More Questions. There's hours and hours of that stuff on the website as well on, what questions do you ask? The other thing I'll mention too, because that 90% doesn't mean man on the street. There needs to be three things, which is chemistry, timing, and money. Chemistry means you like each other. Timing means there's a current need for what you're offering, and they got to have money to buy it. If you got those three things, you should be closing 90% or better. Doesn't mean they all close overnight. Some might take a while to get them. Obviously, the more complicated the situation, those are going to take longer, but you get the idea. All right, let's try another steal and see. Oh, prospecting. This is another interesting twist. To me, when my language on the phone, I try to be, give every possible benefit possible. A lot of times I hear people's phone language. It's so boring. I wouldn't think anybody would give an appointment, but instead let me stop by and show you the kind of work I do. That worked in the 70s. That doesn't work anymore. Actually, my phone language, after I get into a little bit of a conversation, tell people, maybe a sentence, create some credibility. It would be, typically what I do is I spend an hour with people and teach as much as I can about what smart people are doing with their money. This is financial services. I'll answer any questions that you've got. I don't charge for this. There's nothing to buy. Typically, I can make or save people thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars just from this single meeting. Does that sound like that might be worth an hour of your time? I'm daring them to say no. That's more interesting. So that's also in my handout archive. That language I just used is in there. It's alphabetical. It's 18. Oh no, that's a teaching interview. It's anyway, you'll see it. It's 20 in the handout archive. But spruce up, and there's 2 other webinars on phone language and how to get more appointments on the webinar. So check those out. But 2 key things: if you're a relationship builder and you get on the phone, I make a lot of phone calls. I made 800 phone calls in August. September, I had a lot of business that came from that. But I made a lot again. I think I made 300 or close to it in October. I've gotten more efficient. I was doing a lot more cold calling in over the summer, but at any rate, I make a lot of phone calls. I'm really good at it. I still have resistance to getting on the phone every day, but doesn't stop me with what I know now. Some of that stuff I told you about today. But one of my rules is if anybody's negative, if anybody says, how'd you get my number? What are you selling? Something negative, I just get off the phone. Sometimes I'll push buttons on the phone and make it beep like the cat walks across the phone or something. Then I hang up. Nobody ever calls me back. My other favorite is, I think I got the wrong number. Sorry to bother you. I just hang up. Do not mess with negative people. Total waste of time. Also, I'm looking for openness, interest, and connection. And if that's not there pretty quickly, get off the phone. Because again, the chemistry is the key to the whole thing. If you're connecting with people and it's when the conversation's working, those people are way more likely to buy. You leave the rest of those folks for the client controller. That's their job. The client controller's job is to take people that aren't interested and turn them around and get them to buy something. That's not your job as a relationship builder. Give that job up. You don't need to do that ever again. Do not talk to negative people. Walk away if people aren't showing some interest. And that's the key, really. I put that first. Your job's not to get an appointment on the phone or however you're networking or however you're prospecting. You're looking for interest. Get an appointment with the people that are interested. If they're not interested, don't waste your time. And that's a big shift from the way we all got trained. All right, let's get on this, see what else they got. Asking questions. I'm running up on 50 minutes here. Let's see here. What else have I got? Closing. Asking questions. That I'm going to refer you to a couple of things. I've got people are starving to be interviewed by someone who cares. Feeling understood and feeling heard are probably the two important things in terms of selling yourselves. selling yourself. Because most people they're looking for somebody that's going to find out who they are. They don't care what you do. That's the old saying that people don't care what you do until you show you care about them. So there's a lot of this information in my book, How to Double Your Sales, and there's many hours of this on the website. So especially in the supplemental training, and also in the core training, that's $1,000 training on the website, sellingwithoutwrestling.com. Do the core training, especially number 2. That's on interviewing. So all this stuff is covered because we're running out of time here. And then closing. Let me touch on that because, again, I only spent 26 minutes on closing, and it's also on the website. But you don't need to do much. You're really trying to find out if whatever you're working on or whatever you come up with, if you're really helping people figure out what they really want to do, that's going to feel intuitively right to them. And if anything doesn't feel intuitively right, then you got to fix that. You got to make sure that it does. But that's the goal of the whole process. Get whatever they're going to buy, whatever they say the way they want, to get that to feel right to them. Because one of the key questions is, yeah, it makes sense, but does it feel right? That's the question the client controllers never ask. And then, are you ready to do the paperwork? It's either there or not. And I think the other thing that's key, it's okay if people want to sleep on it. You don't get out the book of the 35 closes and start closing people if they say, yeah, it feels right. Let us think about it. That's okay. You let them sleep, and then your next question is, when do you want to make a decision by? Don't give them an answer. Don't give them a multiple choice. Just be quiet. When do you want to make a decision by? Half the time, people will say, call me tomorrow, call me Friday, call me next week. People just want to sleep on it. Make sure it feels right tomorrow. Nothing wrong with that. Highly recommended. So again, that's totally different than the way we're all trained. You've all had that experience where people are just telling you all kinds of things you need to do to get the thing closed. To me, that's nuts. Because bottom line, if you're relationship oriented, you never want to do anything that alienates the client in your relationship. Never a push in your favor. All right. So, I quit on content in 50 minutes. Let me let me spend another. So here's my hang on, let me move this thing here. Now I've updated a lot of these books. I've changed my website some. This is my new book, Living in the Zone. If you go to my website, sidwalker.com, this book is not in my shopping cart. Everything's on Amazon except How to Double Your Sales. But if you click on that, it'll take you to the website, and then you can go to Amazon from there. All the rest of these, except for Double Your Sales, are on Amazon. But you can find them here. If you want to order How to Double Your Sales, that's the only book that's still in my shopping cart. So order that here, and I'll send you an email that describes that process as well. My book on overcoming call reluctance is #1 Amazon bestseller. It's oftentimes in the #1 spot in that category. I waited 30 years to write that book, so it's good. Check it out. That's also, my last 2 books are on audio. The Call Reluctance book is on audio, and so is Living in the Zone, which is the one about the ego. Living in the Zone is basically how to ignore the ego and be more intuitive. All right, and then, let's see, let me get this to work again here. There we go. So, sign up for the free website, sellingwithoutwrestling.com. If you haven't done that, that's my $10,000 website I'm giving away. And if you want to talk about coaching, I typically spend a half hour with people, happy to talk, get to know you a little bit, find out what you're working on, and then email me, call me, pick a time that works for you. I usually work from about 8 to 3 Mountain Time, so make that adjustment for wherever you are. And then let's spend a half hour on the phone and talk about what you're trying to accomplish. A lot of times I can give you some ideas just in that conversation. Probably the key of my coaching success is I'm totally focused on helping people develop their own style and strengths. The problem with learning a system is it only works for about 10% of the people. And when you're developing your own style and strengths based on what feels intuitively right, that always works. My fees are competitive, and also I'm so much faster than most coaches. I can do most anything in half the time because of my intuition and helping other people be more intuitive. Intuition is amazingly fast, and the more intuitive you are, the faster you move. All right. I think that's my commercial there. I try to keep that to about 1% of the whole deal. So I will send out an email with a number of things that we talked about today. Try to get that out this afternoon. And I thank everybody for attending. Find some idea that you got out today and go try it. That's the key. Go try something new. We had a great crowd today, so we'll do this again. I started doing these again last month, and I took a few years off. I got a little burned out. 2 years off, I guess. I did them every month for about 10 years. But especially with my new program with I'm now an ego fighter. If you want to become one of the ego fighters, I'll be doing more on that. All right. Have a great time trying this stuff out, and we'll talk again soon. All right. Bye, everybody.